Once again, this is the place. It's the place for intellectual and spiritual and scriptural honesty, whatever that means. We are not attempting to say that we have a corner on the market concerning honesty, but we are hopefully moving in that direction. We have had some technical difficulties today. We had a leaky roof, and we're going to get it replaced at some point in time. We did have a collapse within the building itself, that is, of one portion. And so we've spent some time cleaning up, and also we're going to call this the Joey Livingston Conundrum Night because we've had so many audio difficulties. So we're going to blame it all on Joey. But that said, yeah, I mean, that's the way that we do things around here. We just push off responsibility to someone else. It's similar to what Christians do in trying to put all of their accountability, all of their problems off on sweet Jesus. And so we're not going to talk about Magic Jesus at first, but we want to move into the conversation rapidly. We're starting a little bit late, but I want to bring our co-host in. And first of all, Bob Graves, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you.
We certainly enjoyed the previous shows tonight. You guys did excellent, and I like your Beatles shirt. Looks nice.
Thank you.
Greg, it seems like you really like to tie into things when it comes to homosexuality.
I do. I'm not sure if that was a double entendre, but yes.
It's strange. I made a statement on Facebook. I was watching, or we were sitting around watching Joni. It's a talk show on channel, here in the South, it's on channel 17. It's Daystar Network, and they were talking about how many homosexuals are being delivered and demons being cast out of all of these homosexuals. And now they have been homosexual free for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. They had various ones on there, and I made a comment on Facebook that I would like to be there to stop that kind of ignorance. I think that it's abusive and all of that, and it seems like you came along and you became, in a sense, someone who wanted to keep nuancing that point. Why do you think that the theists keep making the argument about all of this stuff being so bad? Give me something in brief before we bring out our special guest, Flash.
Well, frankly, I think it boils down to actually less about religion in this respect and more about culture and the fact that it's the other, the concept of something that is different. And frankly, I think that they project a lot of their, I guess, intuitive feeling of icky onto their or into their religious beliefs and then justify through that respect. And I think that all of these things that they attempt to do with trying to say that it's harmful, it's a mental illness, it increases in diseases and anything that they throw out there is really, frankly, just an attempt to justify the fact that the subject makes them uncomfortable and they can't really figure out why. And I think that that's primarily what it always boils down to.
You know, it only took until 1995 for the Southern Baptists to finally admit that slavery was wrong. How long do you think it's going to take for fundamentalists to admit this argument that they're making, this insane argument about homosexuality being this, horrific thing? When are they going to accept it? What are your predictions?
I'd be hard-pressed to even make a prediction on that one because I feel almost as though by the time that they're ready to make an admission like that, it might not even be appropriate to call them fundamentalists anymore. That would be such a huge leap from where they're at right now that it could potentially be the difference of night and day, and they're not even recognizably what we would consider fundamentalist anymore by that.
Right. Since we've been talking about this issue, and we're going to flash Kellish in just a moment because I want to bring him into the conversation. Here over the last couple of days, we've received, lots of concerns from our audience about us stepping forward and actually advocating that, if whoever you're in love with, if you're gay, fine, if you're lesbian, fine, just find someone that you can unite with and enjoy life and find that spot in life to where you can find, a good relationship, something solid, something that you can, wrap your mind and your life around. And we are getting threats because of this, and this, it's strange. It always comes from Christians and people like that, and so we've had several people who have been very concerned, and most of the people who are concerned about our safety are atheists. In fact, we have one atheist in the audience. He didn't bring me this gavel for the purposes of safety, but he thought that I could make good judgment calls, kind of like Yahweh with it, maybe. I don't know. But he's a great welder, and I do appreciate that very much. Okay, he has a bigger gavel, and so maybe we'll get into that in a few minutes. Let's get into the discussion tonight. I didn't want to sidetrack it with this particular topic specifically without our special guest. I'm going to call him Flash. His name is Flash Kellish. I think his first name is Bernie. And he's a wonderful individual. He's representing not just himself, but a large group of people. And so, Flash, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones, for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know that sounds cliche, but it definitely is a pleasure to be here.
We are finding that atheists, you don't have to tell them to read a book. You don't have to tell them to study or anything like that. In theism, you do. You have to encourage people to, maybe read a paragraph or two per week. But with atheists, you don't have to do that. Why is that?
Anyone, I believe, that professes himself as being an atheist, I think this is someone that's automatically kind of putting a label on themselves that a lot of people don't quite understand. A lot of theists don't entirely understand. And as an atheist, I believe that in a sense you kind of have to be a skeptic. You're questioning a lot of things that a vast number of people believe and have been taught for hundreds of years. So that's, you automatically start to study, you start to see things in a different light. You're just exposed to more things, you kind of take facts and the truth into account. You start to figure out what truth really means. And to me, truth is essentially what can be proven, not just personal truth and things that you happen to believe in your own mind without sort of empirical evidence to support it. So.
I'd like to comment on that, Flash, that you mentioned the self-identification of atheist, and that's something that I feel is worth going a little bit more in depth as to what you do and your role as the Vice President of Public Relations for the National Secular Party, which was formerly the National Atheist Party. Now, did the stigma of the name or the label atheist play a role in that decision?
Well, essentially, I mean, just because you identify yourself as an atheist, that's different than secularism. And having it's not really a political position. Atheism, all atheism is a disbelief in any gods due to lack of evidence, or what we feel is the lack of evidence. And in a sense, you can kind of put that on any theist, that they're, in a sense, atheistic to all other gods. So we just felt that having atheism or atheist in the name of the party really, it alienated a lot of people that identify as secularists. They may be theists, whatever belief they may have, but they believe in keeping that belief separate from government. And that is essentially what it is that we're trying to establish as a political party, or trying to become a political party, but just where our focus is as an organization. And having atheist in the name just really, it cut out a lot of people that would identify as being secularist, but may not hold an atheistic point of view. So we just felt that it would be more inclusive to a greater number of people and better further our purpose by changing the name.
One of the things that I like about what you're saying, you're talking about being more inclusive. Here's the New Covenant Group. One of the things that we have stressed is the idea of having atheist and theist alike coming together, looking at the same evidence, not necessarily coming to the same conclusions, but actually developing better methods and practices, and looking at the diversity of it all. And I really applaud your efforts here.
Thank you, sir.
Out of curiosity, have you always been an atheist?
No, sir. My father was, excuse me, Catholic. My mother raised Christian, and people say that that's essentially the same thing, but there are different teachings. But we basically went to Baptist church for a great portion of my life. Kind of grew up, my father's military, so I went to, I lived in Oakland, California, and we went to a predominantly black church there. And at about the age of 6, I got my first Bible from my grandmother. About the age of 8, I was baptized. And I just, going to church every Sunday and going to Sunday school, I started to question a lot of the things that I was being taught, and a lot of the things just didn't sit well with me. And I thought for the longest time, I thought there was something wrong with me because everybody else around me believed, but just I would be there on a Sunday and I would see these folks get the Holy Ghost in them and be rolling around on the floor in their Sunday best, and it just, I was into the church because of the camaraderie and the togetherness of it, and of course you got to love Baptist church choirs. They're really great, but just the stories just didn't sit well with me. And so for the longest time, I just felt really different than everybody else. I felt that I really couldn't talk to anybody about it. So I really kept it to myself for a long time until I found out that there were others out there like me. So that's kind of where I started to expand on that. But it took many years before I finally came out as a non-believer, and even it took longer than that before I finally identified as being an atheist.
Since you were that kind of Baptist in that kind of environment, did you ever receive the baptism of the Holy Ghost?
You mean personally, or?
Right, personally.
I didn't even know what that meant at 8 years old. I don't think, and that's another one of those things where you get into that fine line. Of course, you want to do what's best for your children, but is teaching them about a specific religion, indoctrinating them into your belief, a good thing to do? And I don't think it is, but of course, I'm not going to tell another parent really what to do with their child. But the good thing about my folks is that they really taught me to think for myself. My father was an electronics technician and very much into science and mathematics, and he was very much into education. And both my father and my mother, regardless of their spiritual or religious beliefs, really taught my brother and I to think for ourselves and to question things, always to question things. So I'll always be, grateful to them for that.
So what did you do? How did you think, I should say, when it came to reading the Bible? What was the Bible like for you as you were on this journey, from a very early age until, let's say, you finally admitted that you were an atheist? How did the Bible affect any of that?
Well, the thing is, on Sunday school, you would hear a lot of the good stories from the Bible, the ones that when I would sit down and actually start to read sections of the Bible, and as I got older and actually started to, I didn't actually read the Bible till I was in my 20s, and then really started to kind of I read it cover to cover, but I had read sections of it before then, things that just didn't make sense to me. And the stories that they don't teach to you on Sunday, and the ones that didn't come out in the sermons, later on in the afternoon. But these are things that just always just really didn't, like I say, sit well with me, because why weren't they teaching about these parts of it, the death, the atrocities, the horrors of the Bible that just didn't make, those things just did not make sense to me. And the more I started to read the Bible, and then when I actually did read it cover to cover, I just was like, by that time I was definitely an atheist, even though I didn't identify as that until I joined the National Atheist Party and started to really look more into it. But
what are your thoughts,
I wanted
Bob?
to make a quick comment here again that Flash, just as a heads up, Dr. Jones is very fascinated with people and the individuals here, but we do know that you also have an organization and something that it's your job to help promote. So don't feel bad about self promotion or throwing things out there, trying to tie things in, because Dr. Jones will just ask you about you for the remainder of the show, which I'm
Right.
perfectly happy talking about. But I did want to ask you one thing though, before
Yes.
we I guess go back to you about your organization. Is one of the things that when you and I had talked about getting you on the show initially, you said you're working on sort of what do you call it, a secular pact or like a coalition among different organizations. And can you tell us more about what it is you are doing with that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I don't fault anybody their beliefs. People are welcome to believe what they want to believe. My main issue in what we're trying to do with the Secular Party of America is to give individuals a voice in government, and for us to understand that America is a melting pot. It's a diverse mix of a grand number of good people that have a variance of beliefs, and that as long as we understand that and understand that people, if they're going to be governed, that it should be by those that take all of these folks' beliefs into account and do what's best for the greatest number of people, not just any one sect of society. So as the Secular Party of America, what we're trying to do is to encourage more people that support the separation of church and state, to be able to feel free to speak out, whether you're going on to the school board, city council, or if you want to run for any sort of higher political office. The number of folks that are actually professed secularists or atheists or any other belief besides Christian really is at a minimum, and you can't really count on one hand the number of atheists or professed secularists in government, and we want to change that. We want more people that basically adhere to the separation of church and state and the beliefs that our forefathers intended for this country to have, is adhere to and give these people a platform to be able to speak out, and that we will support them.
Flash, I am a theist, but that's very enticing to me, especially I think what really threw me a loop was recently, and I'm not sure if everyone has heard about this, about the woman that went to a judge to have her determine her paternity of her son, and to give the son the last name of the father in question. But the judge decided to change the baby's name. The mother named the baby Messiah.
Messiah.
And the judge decided that that name is reserved for one special person, who was Jesus Christ, who I do believe existed. But she took it upon herself and with her own religious convictions to say, your baby cannot have that name. And to me, that was just ridiculous. And so, something like you're talking about to me is very enticing. And I do think that when it comes to matters of government, everyone should be represented. And this clearly was a case of overstepping her bounds for sure in government.
Exactly, and we realize our limitations at the moment, and we also realize that we are nowhere near the position right now to actually be a political party. We don't mean to water down the vote. We're not looking to do that sort of thing, but we are looking to support more secular candidates in government and give them a voice. For the last couple of elections, we have voted Democratic. But we entice people basically, or encourage people to just become more informed. Don't just vote for somebody because they adhere to your religious beliefs, but look into their record and what they do and what they stand for. And just because this person may be a secularist, or just because they may be an atheist, doesn't mean that this person can't hold office and do a good job. There are still 7 states in the United States that have on their respective constitutions something written into their constitutions that states that, like, someone that doesn't believe in God can't hold office. And even though these are not really enforced, they're still on the books, and we want this to change. We want people to have a better understand what atheists are, what non-belief is. We aren't just bad people just because we don't believe what you believe. And I think that there's just been It's been a travesty that we are the least trusted minority in America. And that's sad. And these are things that we need to change. So it's an education process, and we don't want to butt heads with people. We don't want to fight them for what they believe. We want to educate and have us come to an understanding.
You know, one of the things that really bothers me, and this is a saying that goes way back into my theism, it was stated over and over again, your viewpoint of God determines your conduct. In other words, if you have a legalistic mindset concerning God, you're going to be a legalist. If you have a concept of God as being a loving God, you're going to have conduct that's much different than a legalist. And I can see some truth in that to a certain degree. But I also have to admit that when atheists look at the Bible, and I'm not talking about critically so in the Hebrew text and in the Greek text, I'm simply talking about the thing, these English translations that you look at. When they pick up a book called the Bible and they start reading and they look at all the atrocities, they look at genocide, they look at infanticide, they look at slavery, they look at all of these things being actually advocated by God and even, ordered by God. And I'm very proud of atheists who are rising above that mindset and saying, I can't accept that. I really applaud that kind of honesty and courage.
Right.
People are afraid to reject the Bible because they're taught this is the final authority, this is what God said. And there's something about atheists to me, or what the atheists are doing, they are presenting a model of honesty. That is, whatever your book says, I can't accept that as morality. I can't accept it as just. And they're willing to walk away from that. And so, to a great degree, I have a lot of respect for atheists who are running for public office because they don't agree with those maniacal kinds of doctrines. What are your thoughts?
Well, regardless of what religious belief you may have, I just there's a fine line that's walked here, because even to me, even if you're a theist that's in government, it's hard not to, because that's basically what you feel that you base a lot of your life on. And people that are devout theists that adhere to whatever religion kind of mold their life after their interpretation of their specific religion. So that obviously would have to have some sort of influence on whatever decision you make, whether it be, what vacation you take this week or what you decide on an abortion bill. So it's really hard to separate your religious beliefs from your political views, but we just ask that you look at it from a grand perspective and not just from what it says in your holy book. Because that's where I come from. Is like, it's not like I'm anti any God. I just, to me, it depends on, people call God different things. To a lot of people, God is the universe. It's the collective consciousness. It's many different things. And just because you're an atheist doesn't mean that you don't have a certain view of the God concept. So I guess we all come at our decisions and our point of views from a certain view on what we consider God, quote unquote, to be. But whatever decisions you make when it comes to politics have to be decided on what's best for the majority. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, as Spock so eloquently put it in Star Trek. So that's where I come at it, regardless of where you stand in your own personal life and your own personal beliefs. That's just where your political decisions have to come from. And same with that judge as far as the Messiah goes. That was a poor decision, a very poor decision by the judge. It's not up to the judge to make those kind of calls. And had that judge been an atheist, that would have never happened. So obviously this judge had some sort of bias when it came to their decision being made.
I don't understand how a judge who's a theist can get away with a decision like that.
Right.
I mean, judges are supposed to make their decisions based on points of law. What point of
Right.
law is there to say that you can't name a child Messiah?
Well, how did that
I-
even come up?
yeah.
Did the
The judge-
city
I
make
was
that,
reading more about this
charge?
when I could
didn't look
clarify.
that much into it, but who actually, how did it
Yeah.
even get into court?
And how do they have standing to bring such a thing?
I can say that reading more about it, it's a child welfare issue that basically was taken up by the court, ostensibly at least, as something that is akin to protecting the child from the long-term negative side effects of things like that. It makes me really curious, though, how things like Penn Jillette's child, Moxie Superhero, or Gwyneth
Crime
Paltrow's Apple are.
Dweezil Zappa, yeah.
Yeah.
Moon Unit
Yeah,
Zappa. Yeah.
yes, Moon Unit. Why these are not brought up on the same thing? There's obviously religious motivations behind it, and I think it's more of just a cover or a ex post facto cover up for what you did and realized that you didn't have any sort of constitutional grounds for doing so.
Well, they did have that family who were naming their children. They had one child named Adolf Hitler.
Ah, yes.
Oh, right.
That was sometime last year, I believe. And it was decided that they were really trying to make a point instead of caring for the child, and that's why that went through.
Well,
And that's not a religious thing.
Right. And that's why I brought it up.
You know, yeah. And even if naming a child Messiah was something that that mental health professionals would feel is setting the child up for a bad situation, we're talking now about a mental health issue. We're not talking about a religious issue. And
Exactly.
and so consequently, the fact that the judge may think that that name is reserved for only one is just totally irrelevant, Mike.
Well, wouldn't this
I'm a
also kind of make it so that people couldn't name their child Jesus?
You'd
No.
think.
You think, yeah.
I mean, this is a dangerous precedent to be setting by a judge, and it's got to be taken to appeals of some sort. There's no way
really
that.
I would wonder.
I mean, she was very bold in saying why she, said the name could not be used. But the mother said, I had no intention of using this name as any type of religious, icon or anything, because she had a child named like Mason and, I don't know, Marcy or whatever. And she just wanted, Messiah, Mason, Marcy, whatever down the line. But the judge did not flinch. I mean, she said specifically it was a religious, overstepping of the bounds of this mother to do that, and she did not agree with it. So all the judge was supposed to do was give the child a last name, and she decided to change his first name at the same time in one fell swoop. And my goodness, this has got to be something going straight up to the next appellate court, obviously.
No, I think
Oh, definitely.
I think that sometimes what we need to do is, to get people past these things by doing things like naming our dogs Yahweh or something like that. Maybe that will nuance a point. I think that we live in an age in which we have too many people in power who are extremely superstitious. For instance, voting here more recently, the candidate that did get in, unfortunately, was the one who wagged the Bible the most. Everything was on biblical principles, biblical marriages, and I've asked questions like this over and over again. Have you ever read the Bible? Why would you want to utilize those principles in 2013? And this person, I don't know, just was using the Bible to get votes. And unfortunately, we're still in that mindset today. And hopefully it will change soon. Because I really think that people need to be examined for what they really stand for instead of trying to use, theological terms or holy books or whatever to get into office. Because certainly a person has to be, there's got to be more to a person than just, a biblical mindset. Go ahead, Bob.
There's a certain amount of ignorance going on here too, because they talk about biblical values. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. I mean, the truth, if I wanted to raise my family using biblical values, then I would probably even be able to consider selling my daughter as a sex slave, and making sure that they did that according to the Levitical law. But that's biblical. Yeah, maybe I could even sacrifice her or something on some sort of an altar.
Own a
if I
slave or
made
two.
some vow to God. The people who say that they have a sense of morality, and sometimes their sense of morality is fine, but when they think that this is all biblical, they don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
The thing that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, homosexuality, most people in theism would approach this as, this is not moral, and we stand for biblical morals, as if, buying and selling, or buying your wife is a good thing, or many other things that I could mention. But I guess my point is we need to move past, the ancient mindset and live in 2013. Would that be fair?
Definitely.
So, Flash, I'll forgive me for playing devil's advocate here for a moment, but now you are the public relations director for the secular party, so I'm sure you are ready to field questions like this, and I think that the public deserves an answer.
Okay.
When you're promoting secularism, isn't that obviously just oppressing people's religious freedom by forcing them to not I can't even say this with a straight face, forcing them to not force their religious values on other people? Isn't that what you're doing?
No, because like I said, I think that it's impossible to separate the two. So I think that regardless of where you feel that your morality is or where it comes from, that it essentially has to be what is best for the majority, regardless of what you say you want to source that to. It comes from the Bible, or it comes from the Quran, or it comes from my parents, or whatever it is that you want to attribute that to. It still has to be what is best for the majority, in a sense. And that's where, regardless of where you stand on that issue, you're going to test that against the will of the mass of the people. So, and if it is what the majority of the people, if they side with you on that, where you come from with it, then that will pass. And if it doesn't, then you'll be voted out. But that's essentially what it is, and where more secularists have to make their voices heard, because there's still a lot of bad laws out there. There's still a lot of discrimination that's happening, and these are things that need to change. So we need to find where those lines are and what should be governed and what shouldn't. Of course, those are difficult lines to figure out, and where you actually draw those lines. But we need to right the wrongs that are out there, and there still are, when it comes to marriage equality and things like that. And the first question that Dr. Jones had answered, one of the differences is the slavery is mentioned, but I don't think that it specifically specifies who slaves would be. But there are 6 passages within the Bible that do specifically speak of homosexuality. So that's why they can always come back to the Bible and say, but my God says. So that's where the difference is. Whereas, like, they can't specifically say, well, black should be inferior because it specifies that blacks should be slaves. So I think that's where the distinction is, and where a lot of people say, well, in one sense, we're justified in doing this, but in the other sense, well, we used to hold this view, but we can't any longer because it just doesn't make sense. We don't have anything to base that on. But that's where a lot of people always fall back to, by saying that it's not, I don't believe this. It's written in the Bible. My God believes this. But that's when I ask them, well, if it didn't say that in the Bible, would you still feel that way? And that's where you get people to actually try to be honest about where they come from with it. And I think that a lot of people just, it's their own personal, they use that Bible to justify it, but they personally feel that way about it.
And what sort of answers do you get when you say, well, if the Bible didn't say that, how would you feel about it? What sort of answers do you get?
Well, you have over 41,000 denominations of Christianity alone, so they themselves really don't have a specific interpretation of what that is. And then you have people within their own denominations that have their own interpretations of that. So whose one do you use? Which one do you go by? Do you go by the letter of the King James Version, or do you go by, a more ancient version that's different? I mean, there's just too many variables in there to say this is the one that you should adhere to. And that's why there just has to be a standardized system that we go by. And law, as we have it in this country, didn't come from any specific source. It's what should be what's best for the majority, what's best for all the people and all their beliefs. It didn't come from the Ten Commandments. It didn't come from any. It's what we trial and error, and over time, this is what we develop that works best, and hopefully is safer and what's best for the greatest number of people.
So basically, you're also saying that regardless of why people are of the opinion they're of the opinion of, that in order for their opinion to prevail, it must be through some sort of democratic due process.
I believe so. I mean, through
Right.
trial and error. I mean, things work for you. I think people these days, regardless of what you want to say, where it originated, good people have a general sense of what is best for you and your neighbor, and for you to get along in your neighborhood, your society, your family, whatever it may be. I think generally people are born good, and that people just want what's best for themselves and for each other. And I think if given that, and if people are educated properly and not lied to constantly, I think people can make a pretty rational decision about how they want to live and get along with other people in their society. I think that given the right for people to make that choice and to vote according to their basic feelings and their conscience, I think that people will vote the right people into office eventually. It's just a matter of education and getting people to understand that atheism isn't necessarily a bad thing. We aren't bad people. We're just like everybody else. We're just like everybody else. We just believe in one fewer God than you. That's all. That's it.
Let me
And Dr.
ask you this question. Go for it, Bob, and then I wanted to ask him a question. Go for it.
You know, Dr. Jones, it seems to me that that one of the reasons why some theists don't want atheists to have some sort of prominent voice is because theists are not willing to admit that part of the reason why we have atheists is because theists have not found a compelling, honest approach to the question of God that is genuinely, authentically, and honestly persuasive. And they'd like to just kind of bury that instead of recognizing that, you know, if you want to have an influence over what someone else believes, you have to somehow approach them in a way they find comprehensible.
Right.
I found that a lot of the claims that theists will happen if atheists become a majority is that mostly what they will claim is what theists have historically done to people who didn't agree with them, in terms of how their beliefs will be handled, how they will be handled, how they will be treated. Many theists seem to have the point of view that atheists will do the same to them what they did to us.
It could
That's
happen.
not true.
Well,
Human
I'm not saying
beings
that
do
would
all
happen.
sorts of things.
Well,
You know,
I'm not saying
people
that that
empowered
would
to do
happen.
all
I'm
sorts
saying that I think
Yeah.
that's what that's what
One
I've
of their
gotten from a lot
fears.
of theists. Yeah, one of their fears.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well,
you know,
they-
the thing is, what they're saying is, I want to be the one abusing you. I don't want you abusing me.
Exactly.
Would you-
That comes from a complete misunderstanding, though, of where we're coming from and what it is we're trying to do. And that's why secularism is a much softer term. But I feel that even a majority of atheists still feel the same way, that we're willing to practice your religion how you wish to. Just please keep it out of government and laws and education, public education, policies. Just essentially keep it to yourself, because there's a lot of religions that we have no problem with, because they don't really try to use their religion to influence the lives of others.
But if we are honest with theism, most theists have an agenda to make sure that they take their beliefs into whatever they're involved in, because at some point in time they believe that Jesus is coming back for everyone, yada, 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 and the Comforter is going to be there in a sense. And so they're looking for something that would satisfy their eschatology. And so it's very difficult for most theists to separate how this government operates. You know, you're going to have the Jerry Falwells who did rise up, and the Pat Robertsons, etc., and they will get people to humble themselves and pray, and God's going to change this land, and everything is done in the name of the Bible. And that's a very, very large group of people who are into that mindset.
And that's
so
something that
very well
politicians
funded.
did.
Yeah, but my question is, and I really like what I'm hearing from you. And so, if you had a candidate who might be running for president this next time, what are the 5 major things that you would like to see changed in America? If you could name 5 things.
Wow, let's see. There being so many. 5 things. Wow, good question, and one that you may completely let's see if I can get a few of these here. One is marriage equality. I'd like to see that dealt with and pretty much stifled. That it shouldn't even be an issue anymore. To have more scientists on the Science, Space and Technology Committee. Have that kind of be a prerequisite that you kind of maybe have to have some sort of science background, or maybe they should have someone that's a qualified scientist to be an advisor on that committee. Let's see, what else? I'd like to work with campaign contributions. I think that should be something that's dealt with. I think that's gotten out of hand to the point where it's just ridiculous how much money is spent on these campaigns. It could be put to better use. I think that we need to really focus on our foreign policy and the wars that we're in and why we're in them and what we're doing to these other countries. There needs to be a better exchange of information, and I know that these wars have been going on so long that people just don't even really, it's not even a part of what people think about anymore, which is sad because there's still a lot of people that are dying and hurting overseas, and a lot of us just go about our stuff from day to day. But can you go about your day-to-day stuff and have that be on your mind all the time? So the happy medium right there. And let's see, 5th thing, geez, I don't know. I got 4.
Very good list. Very good list.
Greg, what would be the 5th for you?
Oh, that's a tough one, but I'd love to see the National Day of Prayer go away, or the faith-based initiatives.
Yes, very much.
Aspects of I don't remember exactly which department that falls under, but anything that has to do with voucher programs for private religious schools, I would love to see.
Let me just say a few things about, if I could. First of
Hold
all,
on,
with the faith-based
Bob,
initiatives.
you're going to distract me, and I'm going to forget my train of thought here.
Oh,
Go ahead.
faith-based initiatives, they're not faith-based initiatives unless they're actually initiated by people of faith, as people of faith. It has nothing to do with the government. So faith-based initiatives is double speak, so I agree with you there. Now, when it comes to the voucher business, part of the reason for that has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with the fact that people who have their kids in private schools are still paying taxes to the public school, and they're not getting the services that they're paying for, and so they're looking for some other sort of thing. So it's a sticky issue, It's
Actually,
hard to know what to
voucher
do with
program,
it.
though, I think the way you're looking at it is more as a general voucher program, but it tends to be, at least in Wisconsin, where I'm from, we have the voucher program is expanding now. It has just been for low-income children in the Milwaukee area school districts because, as they aptly point out, the public schools there don't perform very well. So they allow parents to put their children into private schools, low-income parents, and subsidize the tuition for those schools because those schools ostensibly should improve the results, but the statistics don't support that. As a matter of fact, it's not. There's never been any statistically significant correlation between the students move to private schools and actually doing
That's not
better.
really a secular issue, then, is it?
No, and it's it's. I mean, they do try to play it off as a secular thing, but we really do need to recognize that there's a large aspect of that does come. It essentially becomes taxpayer subsidies of religious institutions at the expense of these public institutions, because this money doesn't just come, it's not an additional tax to pay for these vouchers. They take the money from the regular public school operating budgets. The way I see it is it's actually an attempt to defund the public schools, an attempt to privatize education, and more of a neoliberal conservative movement that's completely secular in that respect. But one of the consequences is the promotion of religion, which is certainly a very strong aspect within the conservative community. And that, it leads me to my final note of what I'd like to add, and that is I would love to see the automatic tax exemption for churches.
I
to
was
be
just going to say the same thing.
removed.
That was my fifth
Yeah.
one.
I have no problem with tax exemptions for charities and organizations that demonstrably do good in the community, but something like the Crystal Cathedral, it has, or the Dinosaur Adventureland, I think was Kent Hoven's down in
Yeah.
Your area.
Creation
there.
Museum.
And,
Yeah, I got shut down.
it did. That was a tax evasion thing, but not for
Yep.
them. The institution itself was tax exempt. It was just Kent Hovind was the one that
Yep.
they shut
Right.
it down because he was the owner. So it's still, I mean, we have the Creation Museum in, where is that, Louisiana or Kentucky?
Kentucky.
That it's a tax exempt organization, and that is absurd.
Yeah, here it's
it's-
shutting down too.
Let me speak to that from a
They just
legal
put in zip
standpoint.
lines.
A not-for-profit organization, there's all sorts of them. They're not just religious, but churches operate in a non-profit manner. And the truth is, if you were to remove their tax exemption, I don't think you'd really generate much revenue, because
I'm okay with that.
but I mean that the sense is that unless the monies at the end of the year that have come in are in excess of the monies that went out to pay for the programs, that's the only sort of profit the organization makes. And a certain amount of it is allowed to be budgeted to move forward for the coming year, as it were. And in nonprofit organizations, they move whatever it is their purpose is forward in a manner that is not allowed to inure to the benefit of an individual. And so there's a sense in which nonprofit organizations operate on a particular structure. And I would have a hard time figuring out how. I'm not arguing that we need to give these guys all of these tax exemptions. I can't understand from a legal standpoint how you can isolate religious nonprofit organizations and say, oh, but you guys got to pay taxes, even though other nonprofit organizations.
Well, that's actually not what I'm saying, Bob. I'm saying that religious organizations right now have actually churches specifically. If something's classified as a church, it essentially gets an automatic exemption from taxes. Their application process is much simpler than any other nonprofit organization, and that is, I think, a travesty that they don't need to provide the same levels of documentation or show that they are actually a nonprofit.
I've actually
organization
I've
deserving
actually
of this.
founded 2 churches, and we had to go through an entire IRS aspect. We had to tell who the original people were involved, to demonstrate that nobody was receiving any benefit. We had to identify who they were, their social security numbers. We had to meet all of the requirements of a 501c3 application, and the fact that it was a church, and there are things other than churches in 501c3, we had to do that. Now I'm just saying that as a matter of clarification, in terms of the law. Now, it may be that some people are getting away with ease and an easy ride for some reason, but as far as I was aware, the law requires 501c3 applications to meet all the requirements of a 501c3 application.
Churches do get special exemptions. Also, my main stickler with that is the churches that use this exemption as a front as they actually run businesses through the church. Either
That's not
bookstores.
true.
Well,
That's not true. A church that sells something has to declare that accounting
Right.
separately
Sales
and
tax.
must pay sales tax
That's
and
true.
must pay.
The churches
That is
don't
true.
sell things, though. they give them away as gifts or rewards for certain levels of
Yeah,
donation.
Well, when you
similar
look
to
at
the ways
when you
that,
look at a lot of the mega churches here in the U.S., they operate as businesses, not as churches, but they
Yeah,
still
but-
get the same
but there's
exemptions.
a big difference between operating as a Jim Bakerism than
But-
what we're talking about in
But
terms of
that's what I'm
churches.
saying is
I mean-
those are the ones I have a problem with,
Right,
not
well, there'd be a
necessarily
lot
your
of
local
people
community
that are
church, but
hungry
these.
and that need to be clothed and need to be fed that would lose out on those benefits.
But
because
this also
churches
comes
do
from
that.
the faith-based initiatives that Bush put in that undercut a lot of the secular organizations that used to provide those services.
Right, I mean, give those
So-
too, but I'm saying,
But-
churches, regardless of what you may think about them, the ones that are operating properly within the confines of, you know, IRS regulations and whatnot, or exemptions, you know, a lot of churches feed a lot of people. And I would hate to see that, you know, go by the wayside. If they could possibly, you know, divide it and say, in this area, you know, you have these benefits, but in this area, you can't. I mean, you can account for things like that.
Rhonda, I don't disagree there, and I think that we need to recognize that churches certainly do good things in the community, and those churches that do that would very certainly qualify with the same nonprofit regulation that the other ones do. But some of the special treatment that churches get are things like other tax-exempt organizations of the 501c3 variety are restricted from how they, actually all are, how they can promote political candidates and political issues. Whereas churches are technically bound by this restriction, and yet they very, very blatantly disregard it on a very regular basis. And
You know, that's
it's
amazing
not
to me that they do that,
enforced.
because in this area they can't get away with it. We've had churches in my area here who have had their tax exemption revoked by the IRS
Right.
because somebody said something about Bill Clinton.
Right.
And
That does
and
not
I've seen
happen
it
nearly
happen. So
often enough,
it
is I
could be a
think the point that I'm
regionally
trying to make.
operating phenomenon, but here in New York, they don't put up with any of that, and they're not gonna, you know, you start talking about candidates and stuff like that in church. It's just, you know, you
Well,
can't even
that's
have them as
something
guests,
that
you know?
I don't think that you have a completely representative sample there. And
No
there's
doubt.
a very good amount of that abuse going on, and even if sometimes it's very, very, very lightly veiled. But I think overall we have the churches get special treatment, and that's the part. Again, I have no problem with a church being tax exempt if it is doing good things for the community and it's not paying exorbitant salaries to the preachers or the people behind it. If they're running like a normal nonprofit, then they should have no problem being treated like a normal nonprofit. But that's not always the case. And
Do you know
that's
how
sort of
much
what I mean
money
by
the head of the Girl Scouts earns, and how much money the person who heads up the Girl Scout cookie operation
Right.
earns, or how much the Red Cross top earn? It
About to
is
say, Girl Scouts took 'em out.
obscene. Yeah. Actually, to be honest with you, I really think that there's a great deal of corruption across the board with nonprofit organizations in terms of how they're running things. But it's really got to be changed. I wouldn't be, you know, if we got rid of all nonprofit organizations, or at least in terms of taxes, one thing I'd like to see is, you know, let's not involve nonprofit organizations in tax-exempt property. You know, they own this big block on the corner, and there's no property tax on it.
Once again,
we
this
do
is-
have some comments, and I wanted to read one from Alan. Let me give you the list. Number one on the list would be education. Number two, science. Number three, balanced military budget. Better government-funded medical system, and frowning heavily on religion and government. I made a list. I gave 5 things that concern me, and I want to hear what your thoughts are, because I'm very thankful that you're very involved, by the way, Flash, in politics. I think that world peace is something that we need to have. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes, achieving that is the question.
Well,
Sounds like a Miss
Not a-
America contestant.
Exactly.
Everybody wants
Well,
it.
well, I'm simply saying we're spending so much money on the military. In other words, we could actually give everyone in the military a raise by cutting our military budget. In other words, for every tank that's made, another tank is made. We make 2 of everything, and we could just simply cut back and bless our military people. But yet at the same time, it seems like we're more interested in practicing the mindset of what they did back, let's say, in the Old Testament. You know, you just send people in and kill all the little babies, and you're not interested in taking care of the person who actually is causing the harm. That would be Pharaoh. And so my point is, we're spending very little on world peace, but we're spending lots of money to develop things that cause a lot of collateral damage. And you can't go into Iraq, for instance, and do the bombing that we did and have that kind of collateral damage and expect those people to like us. Would you agree with that? And so
I agree. Yep.
and so my point is, in universities all over the world, you have young people who are willing to rise above their governments, and they are willing to say, you know, I'm not so controlled by the mindset of our government and even the mindsets of religion, but I'm willing to think outside of the box. And I think that people could take the approach and start dealing with younger people and start dealing on a university level and start talking about world peace and get a conversation going in every country on that level. And I think that it would help much in every way. Number 2, I think that our economy is very primary in this context. I'd like to see someone voted in who had really an agenda to fixing the economy, not just within the United States of America, but who had a dream as pertaining to how we are going to do this thing globally, because we have become a global market. And number 3, I'm very concerned about educational paradigms, because here in America, I find that some universities are ascending, whereas most are not, because most are satisfying the lowest common denominators, and professors are not being able to do what they're trained to do. And this bothers me. Number 4, I'm very interested in every man, woman, boy, and girl eating. Therefore, feeding the hungry is a primary to me. Number 5, health care. I think that everyone deserves health care regardless of how much money they make. And so my question is, my list of 5, what would you say about that?
I'd say that your list of 5 is pretty much better than my list so far. But yeah, I agree with all those. Those are all. If I would have had a top 10 list, I'm sure I would have included all those in there as well. Education for me has always been a top priority, and I think that one of the ways that we go about achieving this world peace is getting more people involved in things that they love to do. I think far too many people work. They have jobs, but they're not jobs that these people want to go to every day. They're not furthering their education. They're too busy trying to make ends meet, and they feel very frustrated. They feel that they're not able to spend enough time with people that they care about, with their kids. I think that's been very destructive to families. So I think that all those points that you brought up and more are things that yes, a politician should concentrate on, or our government should concentrate on, and people in general should focus on. These are things that help take care of each other, and when you're happy, when you're doing things you love, then you help to spread that. You help to share that with other people. You want other people to be on the same level that you are. So yeah, I agree with you on all your points.
You know, medical doctors keep telling us that they have to see so many patients in order to make it work financially. And I've had just private conversations with them left and right, and they keep saying, Dr. Jones, it's simple. We need to see a lot less patients so we can do what we're qualified to do for our patients. And so they're not doing that simply because we have a mess within our healthcare system with the insurance, et cetera. And so it's becoming more of this, let's call it this Bob Graves conundrum. And I'm toying, Bob. We like to play with that here. But it's sad. It really is sad. And so,
Well, let me tell you, most things, this is one of our biggest problems. Most things in life, excuse me, are very relative. And when our son was in Iraq, I thank God for the billions of dollars that they used to, reinforce all the Humvees and the Caymans that he had to ride in. So, as a mom, sort of like what Flash was saying, you go in there and you have your list of concerns and your feelings and your relativities, and I would say yes, absolutely, give the military much more money so they can, protect my baby. And that's one of the pitfalls of going in as just a person.
Rhonda, how could anybody ever really want to forbid you the desire to have your boy protected, and yet at the same time there's another mom somewhere else who's saying, don't spend all this money on your military because you're bringing people in and you're killing my kids.
I agree. I agree.
It's just a terrible, difficult. And if I could say something about the economy that you mentioned, Dr. Jones, we have a fake economy. The way we measure the health of the economy used to be a way that was directly related to how well people are doing. But over the years, those same measures are still being used to tell us whether or not our economy is healthy, but those measures no longer really relate or correlate to how well people are doing. They only relate to how well corporations are doing. And as a result, we could do all sorts of things that make the economy look good while people are still doing badly. And it's a fake economy. The truth is, a real economy is an economy that finds a way of moving the goods and services throughout a culture so that the various people in the culture participate in the creation of the goods and services we need as a people, and that each of us then participate in the fruit of that having been accomplished. And we're just not doing that, It's crazy.
well, you have my vote, Bob.
I bet you could outrun Anthony Weiner for mayor of New York City.
That's about it, probably, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Looking at your site, I see you've got a banner there that says Christians who support a secular country. Can you go into why Christians would actually be supportive of this movement? Because there are a lot of theists who will tune into the show who want to know why they should support basically removing active Christianity from having a role in government.
Right. Well, just because no one particular viewpoint or religion should influence government or anything that deals with the majority of the people. Just by the same token that I wouldn't want somebody that was a Muslim in there trying to dictate policy from his Muslim point of view, or Shinto, or any particular point of view, whatever that may be. From a secularist point of view, you do what's best for the greatest number of people, and that's an area that you come from that's all inclusive, and it doesn't just specify. It's not like, let's open this book and see what the book says about this particular issue. It's, what do you think about it? What do you think, how does it affect your family and your community, and what's best for the greatest number of people? Not just what this book says or what you feel from your point of view. When you're elected as a government official, you're there as a representative of the people and what is best for the people, not just what point of view that you're bringing to the table on it. So that's why
I would make the argument that religion is important to understand before one can adequately address it. For instance, I talked with several military linguists, and Bob, this will be of much interest to you. And I had a wonderful time speaking with them, and they said, Dr. Jones, we've never heard of these indexical and deictic elements that you keep talking about. And so we got into it, and they said, we don't even practice those things when we're out in the field. And so when you look at the beginnings of the war in Iraq, we had very few people who actually understood the language. These people were wrestling with a nominal language structure that they really couldn't put together well. And the bottom line is the way that we were looking at the documents, we were misled simply because the linguists really were using decoding methods rather than good linguistic mindsets. And so
They were driven.
this really confused all of our senators. So we our intelligence agency was really given misinformation. And because of that, we went to war and look at all the death. And you can't make friends by killing people. And my point is, we've got to learn how to spend more money on making peace with people and getting more involved in education and science and things of that nature rather than building bombs to blow each other up. We've been doing that for too long. So we need to move past the Old Testament mindset of our government mindset and move into a new world in which we can embrace thinking and embrace reasoning with people who don't think like we do. For instance, if we had a president that could understand, Iraq is divided into several segments of religious mindsets. In order to deal with it, you're going to have to understand how religion works. If you don't, you're not going to get to first base with him. Would you agree with that?
Entirely. And it's not just, it's understanding religion, but it's also understanding people and different cultures. It's understanding folks before you even come in and try to tell them how they should be, or
Right.
if you don't have an understanding of the person that you're dealing with,
But-
how do you come to, I don't know, that's
But-
basic.
It's an anthropological issue. It is not a question of what religion is right. It's
Right.
but of understanding that when people who operate religiously will do so within a paradigm and appreciate.
And that's
that
where
paradigm.
secularism comes from. That's what we're trying to emphasize, and one of the main reasons why we feel that people should at least become more familiar with us. Just by joining this party doesn't mean that you have to distance yourself from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or anything else. We're just looking for more like-minded people that agree with our platform, which you can find by going to our website, our brand new website. And we're also in the process of looking for a president. We are presidentless at the moment. So here pretty soon in our next policy proposal process, we will be searching for a president of the party. So anyone that feels that they're qualified, by all means, we're looking for you to perhaps throw your hat into the ring.
Flash, I have a question for you. How could, say, someone like myself, they call me the unconventional pastor. What sort of a statement could I make as a pastor that clearly shows that I am for a democratic process that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I am a theist? How could I lend a theistic piece of support to that?
All right, well, there's lots of ways that you can get involved that way. There's the Rock Beyond Belief things that Paul Loby, he's a gentleman, he's the military director for American Atheists, is involved with. He's also good friends with Jerry DeWitt, who's with the Clergy Project, who's going to be running for mayor. I'm not sure what city he's going to be running for mayor for, but that should be happening here real soon. And of course, Sean Faircloth, who's looking to put together these free thought conventions, basically, where we are enticing people from different states to basically come out and kind of profess their secularism and bring the issues of their respective states and communities, cities to light. We want these people to come out and speak out about what the problems are in these different cities and different states, and bring the problems of government local, so we can start dealing with these issues in a grassroots basis. Let's start from the ground up and getting more people's voices heard and involved in politics, and having more people that don't necessarily identify with any religion, or even if they do, to just feel that your voice is welcome in the grand scheme of things. We want more people to
As a
speak out
voice.
and have their voices heard.
So you can be a theist and a secularist at the same time.
Easily, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there
I-
are Christian secularists and Muslim secularists, and yeah, so it's definitely possible. Whereas like
I think I'm one, yeah.
when we were the National Atheist Party, you don't find too many people that identify as being a Christian atheist. So yes, this is definitely, we feel, far more inclusive, and we are welcome to all that share our goal of separation of church and state. So believe what you want to believe, and let's move this country forward.
Do you have any connection or any talks with Americans United for Separation of Church and State?
No, sir, not at the moment, but I hope to be speaking with the Secular Coalition for America, the Enlighten the Vote people, and any other organization that's interested in helping bring this to fruition, getting more people involved in politics and getting more secularism in politics. So
The reason why I
definitely
brought
seek us
them up-
out, look me up online, or on Facebook you can find me, or there's different ways.
All right, we have.
But you give
Freedom
out
from
on my-
Religion
Go
Foundation
ahead.
is another one, and that actually it does go back a little bit. I want to make one final point on the tax thing because I can't leave something be. That they currently have a case going on about the parsonage exemption that churches are given for, or realistically clergy is given for either housing provided for them or income paid to them to provide housing that
gone.
is exempt
That's
with
gone.
no upper limit whatsoever. And the Freedom from Religion Foundation is currently involved in a lawsuit where, ironically, the government is trying to say that the two representatives of the Freedom from Religion Foundation that have been begun being paid a parsonage now so that they can get standing to challenge this law, are trying to identify them as ministers of the gospel to get past this exemption. So that is one very blatant issue on that side. But
Can I
I-
share something with you, Greg, concerning the parsonage issue? And I want to share this on a personal level because my father was a minister of 60-plus years. He lived in a parsonage, that is, he and his family. That would include me just about all of his life. At the latter part of his life, I encouraged him, you need to buy a home. But the church that he was a part of encouraged the parsonage issue. They paid him very, very little money. And this is why he had nothing the majority of his life. And so lots of these structures are set up to bless, quote unquote, the groups of people who form the church, and they do absolutely nothing for the ministers themselves. And
unless
so
the ministers are the people who form the church, in which
well,
case
just a minute, let
things
me
like
finish my
Jerry
point.
Falwell can.
Well, I'm saying you're
get-
picking on a handful of elite people because most of the ministers are suffering because of the parsonage issue, because the people
Well,
in
in that
control
case, it
would
could
be
be
a
an unintended
democratic. Let me
consequence.
finish my point. Most of the pastors who are living in parsonages are being underpaid. They don't have enough money to even live on, and they get most of their clothing out of the rummage. And maybe you don't know what that feels like, but I did when I was young. I know what it feels like to, go shopping in the back of the church where, you get someone's used clothes and you live in a parsonage and, you just pray that, something good will happen from time to time. And I know what it,
Did you know?
go for it, Pop.
Did you know that, that in some ways these laws have already changed? For example, although a parsonage can be a tax-exempt piece of property, the minister who lives in them now, and this is something, I don't know when your dad moved out of a parsonage, but today, a minister who lives in a parsonage has to pay income tax on the rental value of that parsonage. And
Right.
he has to consider it as income.
Right, that is very true.
The day that we moved my father out of the parsonage and actually said, hey, Dad, you can have a real house and you can invest your money here. Finally, he started building up, assets, etc. And I was very, very proud of him. But it took, his children to do that for him. And please understand that there has been an evolution of all of this happening. And the church has been, in a sense, abysmally ignorant. And it's been very abusive towards many of its ministers. And so, there is there is something to be discussed there. And I would suggest that anyone who approaches church people, especially ministers, do it with a lot of compassion, because most of the ministers that I've met in my lifetime are not the Jim Bakkers or the Jerry Falwells or the Pat Robertsons, the people who take advantage of you. Most of these people are people who have been taken advantage of. They have been abused by the church. Do you follow what I'm saying?
I don't disagree with where you're going. I actually just brought that up as one additional example. Bob, I'm not sure I agree with you. From what I'm reading here is the reason that the Freedom from Religion Foundation is suing on this is because it is, and I'll quote here the article from Forbes. It says, the parsonage exclusion, code section 107, allows ministers of the gospel to exclude from income both in-kind housing they receive from congregations and
It's not
cash
true.
housing allowance that are spent on housing.
Yeah, I think
It's
Bob
not
is- I
true.
think
It's not
Bob's
true.
right.
Yeah, if you file your taxes as a minister, you have to declare the parsonage value, the retail rental value of the parsonage as income. But there is something else that is, in my opinion, inequitable, and that is this. So the minister moves out of the parsonage and buys his own home. He is allowed a housing allowance that the church can pay him, that so long as he doesn't spend more than that housing allowance for his mortgage, his insurance, and his utilities, he doesn't have to declare that as income. He gets a housing allowance. And of course, people like presidents of universities, they get housing allowances too, and things like that. There's a number of professions that where you're paid a certain amount of money to house yourself, and you don't have to pay a dime of income tax on it. But that is so odd that you live in a parsonage, you have to pay retail value. You got to pay income tax on the retail value, but you buy your own home. And the way the law is currently set up, the church can designate a certain amount of your salary as housing allowance, and it's tax-free income.
Let's move on to education.
That's weird.
I would like to find out, Flash, what are your concerns today with education? What would you do differently?
I feel that we need to start taking care of our teachers a little more. I think that far too many people think that they don't really look too much into that. My brother is a high school teacher out in San Diego, and I often get like concerns from him, or he kind of expresses his concerns with me just about the fact that like testing standards have just been minimized, and that just our children aren't as educated as they used to be. So I would really focus more on education, more on science and critical thinking. Let's see, what else?
If I can,
What's that?
if I can interject real quick.
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, on your list of 10, as you said, where would education be?
Oh, it would be somewhere near the top. I mean, of course, those are all good points that Dr. Jones brought up, and so it's really hard to say, to put those five in order, or to include the points that I brought up, to put them like they're kind of like across the line. Like it would be number one, A, B, C, D, and even that would be hard to like put them in any sort of order. They're all very important things, of course, in order to want to educate yourself. It's much easier to educate yourself when your belly's full, or you've been fed, so you have housing, you've got decent clothes to wear. So taking care of
remember
our
those
people
days.
essentially, and focusing more on their basic needs, I think will help us immensely. Each one of those points that we want to concentrate on, you have to take care of the basics first, and work your way up from there. So
I understand. I agree with you, and I've actually thought about the education issue for several years. The last time I checked, the education budget was less than $60 billion, which is, with how many schools are out there, it's a pittance. And then you have something like the military budget, which is, I think, $1.5 trillion. And then
yes,
then the laughable NASA budget, which is $350 million a year. But with education, I have a 1982 edition of Popular Science, And in it was a message from the National Science Foundation saying that schools need to be revamped. Science, critical thinking, and mathematics need to be redone. The one from 1982, which, if I'm not mistaken, we're actually still using, needs to be kicked out the door, new one brought in. And the rough estimate would have been $1.5 billion to redo the program, and it would be done within 13 years. But the government chose not to do this, and the National Science Foundation said, if you don't, things might get bad.
Yeah.
And it's not the only thing that's
Yeah.
led to a bad situation in this country, but I'd say it's a big contributor. So
Yeah. The body of knowledge belongs to the culture. Education is not just something that becomes an asset an individual owns. The body of knowledge belongs to the culture, and we invest in ourselves when we invest in education. We invest in our culture.
that's I did a little bit of statistical analysis, just dabbled a little bit into it and figured out if we rebuilt the education system instead of a primary book and standardized testing, instead doing a hybrid of book and interactive learning, combined with a handful of standardized tests, and then most of the tests being letting the teachers make, and giving teachers more freedom to teach as they wish, and definitely increase their paycheck, because they would deal with 30 plus kids who they can't do nothing about now. So yeah. Also try and shrink the classroom size so teachers have more time to deal with individual students, instead of, like when I was in high school, each teacher had 150 students to care about. Get that below 100 and
It's insane.
might be able to do something.
You know, to me, the educational paradigm that we have now needs to be reconstructed. I'm more of a person who is in favor for the idea of a classical education than the kind that we have currently. But that would be another point. Are you guys vetting people who might be possible candidates, Flash?
No, not at the moment. We're not looking to do that sort of thing at all. We obviously are not in a position to be able to back any sort of candidates or campaign for any candidates. Our donations are not where we'd like them to be. So that's not
It would
what
just
we're
be an
doing at the
endorsement.
moment.
Yeah.
What's
It would
that?
just be an endorsement. It would just be an endorsement. At this
Yes,
point.
more or less. Just helping. We're basically trying to educate people right now. We're looking to just encourage more people to kind of look into their local politics, and one of the things that I'm hoping to start up here real soon is basically a campaign of why shouldn't you run for office. So there's a lot of people out there, I feel, that they don't know that much about it, but if you kind of display it out to them and show them, okay, well, here, these positions are opening on the school board come November. Why shouldn't you look into having a voice on the school board, and kind of bringing these to people? I think more people will be actually encouraged to actually run for these offices. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to encourage folks with. And I was going to mention also that one of the things that inspired me when I was in school and also really helped me with my non-belief was the show Cosmos, obviously with Carl Sagan,
Yeah.
which is coming out again next year with
Yep.
Neil deGrasse Tyson actually as the star of the show. So I think that's really going to help a lot of students with education and being more involved with science. And I think that would also help the budget with NASA, because it's going to really spark. I know it did for my generation and for me, and I think it will do it again for the next generation here once it comes back out. I believe it's next year that it's supposed to come out. So.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't get delayed again.
Can you tell people a little bit about your URLs phone numbers or whatever, so people can get a hold of you? Why don't you give out that information?
Okay, well, if you go to our old website, you'll be directed to our new website, but I'll give you the new website. It's, of course, www.secularamerica.org. So it's real easy to find. That'll take you to our brand new website. If you have our old website, which was usanap.org, it'll redirect you to our new site. You can find us on Facebook. We have chapters in all 50 states, including District of Columbia. So if you're on Facebook, just type in Secular Party of, and then it should direct you to your state chapter. Several of the state chapters on Facebook weren't able to be switched over. Those are sort of problems that you have with Facebook. If you changed your name, you can't switch it over. So some of them are still at the National Atheist Party kind of thing. But if you find us on Facebook, we'll point you in the right direction. So we're on Facebook and our new website. Please, by all means, check us out.
I would like to ask Greg this question, and I would like for you to follow it up. How can you change states like the state of Texas when it comes to their track record with atheists running for office?
Well, one of the good things is you've got people like Aaron Ra, who lives in Texas, and one of our biggest memberships is from Texas. So it's tough, and that is one of the toughest states. But you've got some people that are good people out there fighting for what it is that we're doing and moving this cause forward. Because I mean, you got a lot of creationists that are trying to push that agenda back into schools, and Kentucky is one state that's doing that as well, and we're doing what we can to battle that. You've got Ken Ham that was out there recently in Texas, just talking at the homeschooling convention, I guess, that was out there, and they were trying to push creationism in the schools out there. And you had Aaron Ra and a bunch of folks that actually went out and protested at these things. So we're speaking out. We're speaking out in places where you've got a lot of people that are in Texas, and that's a very religious state, but they're doing what they can to kind of bring awareness.
Are there any states that actually enforce the law that you can't be an atheist and run for office? Are there any that actually enforce that?
Not that I've heard of, and obviously I believe Freedom from Religion Foundation would probably take issue with that. But no, I haven't heard of that actually being enforced. I believe that the SCOTUS ruled that unconstitutional. But it's still actually on the books, and that's something. I created a petition a while back to actually have those portions of the respective state constitutions, have those portions be stricken. I know it's history, and that maybe we should preserve that in some way to show how we used to be, how our thinking used to be. But I just don't feel that those should actually be on the books any longer, and they should actually be removed. I find it offensive to people that don't.
Unfortunately, due process requires that in order for a law to be stricken from the books, either the legislature has to decide to do so, or a court has to have a case withstanding before them to then strike it down. And I think you got a situation where very few legislators are going to dare stand up and say, hey, let's get rid of this law about atheism. And there's not going to be any because they're not enforcing it. No case is going to come before the court.
Greg, I wanted to give you an opportunity to address the state of Texas. How can we change the state of Texas quickly?
I really struggle with that question. I mean, there's a decent amount of speculation that the rapidly expanding Latino population there is going to change the political atmosphere of Texas or the political environment within the next decade or so, which is intriguing. But I really think that the only way that things like this are going to happen is by forcing the conversations and having the uncomfortable confrontations that come along with them. Things like the billboard campaigns that the American Atheists ran when they did their convention in Houston this year, and many other smaller parts that include the internet or podcast, what we're doing, and any sort of interaction in which we can challenge the people that are pushing for theocracy across the board is the only way that it's going to change in general. And Texas, I think, is just another one or another portion that will have to change as the times change. It may be a little bit delayed from the rest. There may be a bit more tradition and things that are associated there. But I know a friend of mine on Facebook, Faisal Saeed Al Mutar, just recently moved to Texas from Iraq. He is the admin of the Global Secular Humanist Movement page, and he is stating that he really enjoys being in Texas, and he's not feeling like it's a oppressive state towards atheists, and very welcoming and things to him. He hasn't really dealt with any conceivable or not. I shouldn't say conceivable. Any real persecution, but then again, he's coming as a refugee from Iraq. So the perspective, I think, is also important. As much as we will complain here in America that we have, attempts at theocracy and pushing religiously inspired laws into place, we do have things like the Lemon Test from the Supreme Court and the very explicitly secular Constitution that give us a large degree more freedom, even if we have places like Texas that is within the perspective of the United States a pretty religious area and with pretty religious laws. But if you're coming from the Middle East, they're about as secular as they get.
Yeah.
Flash, it seems like you're coming from more of a perspective that's atheism 2.0. Am I wrong?
No, I guess it is the next step in atheism. And of course, there's still a lot of anti-theists out there, and there's nothing wrong with being an atheist. That was one of the, I guess, arguments that the people that were against the name change had was, why are we hiding from being atheists? There's nothing wrong with being atheist, and I agree. I agree 100% with all those folks, and it had nothing to do with running away from the word. It's just that that a lot of people don't identify as atheists, and especially in what it is that we're trying to do as a political movement or as an organization that's involved in secularism and the separation of church and state, is that we weren't about atheism. We're a secular organization, and so that's what we wanted to promote. So no, there's not a darn thing wrong with atheists, and nothing wrong with atheism whatsoever. We just wanted to be more inclusive of more people that supported our platform and where we're coming from as an organization.
Flash, give us your feelings on, I forget the name of the town, it was a little town in Florida where there was a monument of the Ten Commandments just recently, and I think Eric Hovind and Cy Ten Bruggencate, they were
County.
there.
Yep. Well,
And,
Stark
excuse me?
County. It's Stark, not Stark County.
Okay,
Put up by the American Atheists.
Right, and then
Yeah.
the American Atheists then erected a monument for, their belief or non-belief, their stance. Do you think either one of them should have been in place there at the courthouse?
No, but that is the compromise. So obviously, American Atheists and there's several other organizations have, when that's been tested, when there have been references to biblical things or the Ten Commandments, that's been challenged in a lot of places, and in a lot of places they were taken down. But in this instance, the Stark County decided that they were going to leave them, but then by leaving them, that established a precedent that then all viewpoints, all religious viewpoints, were open to be presented. And so they were within their rights to do so. But now, of course, if Muslims want to come in, or Satanists want to come in, or whatever want to come in and erect a monument, as long as they pay for it, they're fully within their rights to do so. So I see this sort of thing happening, and the American Atheists have pledged to do so in as many instances as possible, where they have chosen not to actually remove the references to biblical principles. They will be countered with a monument from a different perspective. So.
But
They're
it
trying to
seems-
force the nonsense, yeah.
Right, but it seems like, though, that what you're trying to promote is to abstain from any type of monument or any type of reference, any type of religious view, or on the other side of that, non-religious view, just human. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I think, am I wrong that you think both of those, it'd been better served not to have either one of them at the courthouse?
Well, obviously the Ten Commandments were already there. I'm not familiar exactly with like how long that they were actually on there, but you can pretty much rest assured that it was there for quite some time before somebody actually made reference to it and actually brought it to the forefront here. But it's one of those fine lines. It was basically funded by an independent donor that paid for these things, and they've actually supposedly paid for 50 more. So you may see these things being erected in all 50 states. I'm not exactly
Yeah.
sure where their plans are for having the others erected, but I think that it's a non-violent way of expressing an opinion and a counterance to the decision by the court. It would have been just as easy for them to have removed the non-constitutional display of the Ten Commandments, but this is their response to the decision by that court of that county to do what they did.
You know, one of the things that I don't like about many things here in America is actually the avoidance of. And so my question has to do with, do you think that it's better to avoid discussions about theism and atheism in the university classroom? Or do you think that that is something that needs to be dealt with by students in an organized manner, that is in the university, rather than just to the side?
Well, whatever the class is about is what that class needs to focus on. I don't see religion needing to be discussed in a mathematics class. There's
I can agree
classes
there, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about
Okay, I'm sorry.
introducing, creationism into science. That's not what I'm talking about. Science is science. You just need science. But should universities open up their doors and say, listen, religion is very important to the majority of the people. And this is not just true in America, but this is true across the world. And so if there is going to be logical discussion, should not the conversation happen in a place where legitimate rhetoric can take place? Because this is not going to happen in churches. And so, you need
You're
a
talking
place.
about them hosting these conversations, not teaching.
Exactly. This is not a teaching platform, but a place to where they can host lots of debates, discussions, meaningful discussions, and do it in a sensible way. Because, churches are going to do all kinds of things to set up things to where they can create, it's like the latest Ray Comfort video. It's not going to be thorough. An evolutionist, for instance, P.Z. Myers, what did he get? 10 seconds to answer the question. That's not fair. But if you take theists and you take atheists together and you provide a platform at a neutral place, and you say, let's have a discussion here. Let's allow the discussion to last, and let's keep this going, because we don't want our students to be confused. If there is any merit to X, Y, or Z, let it be stated, because I think that a lot of the students are confused. I know that theists are very confused. In other words, it's obvious that in Christianity alone we have over 38,000 different denominations, and that's just the denominational confusion. Inside of each denomination there is, much more confusion. And so I'm simply asking the question, do you think that the university would be a good place, a neutral place, to where these kind of discussions could go on, so our children and our great-grandchildren would have a place to say, I had an opportunity to get outside of the four walls of the church to think. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, by all means. By all means, universities are great places because you get such a diverse mixture of people from all over to do that. Yeah, more universities should provide that. Towns in general, the more opportunity you have for having people come together and actually discuss things rationally, the better we will be as a society, as a nation, as a world. The communication is key.
If I can interject real quick.
I approached one of the, let me finish this point and then we can go. I approached one of the schools here in town, that would be Pensacola State College. And I asked them, I said, if I brought P.Z. Myers, now P.Z. Myers he's a neurobiologist, if I'm not mistaken, he's been on our show twice. I said, if I brought people like him and other biologists like Greg Bray and others to Pensacola and had a venue to where atheists and theists alike could talk about biology and their concerns, could we utilize the school to have this kind of discussion? And they said no. And my question is, why are these colleges, and I'm not talking about all, I'm saying some, why are they saying no so quick?
That's a challenge to their held dogmatic beliefs. I think that's a threat to their belief system. Yeah, bringing that in, it's inviting critical thinking and rational discussion. And how could you possibly say no to that, especially when it's presented in such? What would they prefer? You know,
I have no idea. I said these professors would be much better than what we have currently here in this particular city.
Jones?
Yes, sir.
I would recommend that you see a student organization that would be more open to that. They would have the open door to sponsor such an event as that, whereas the university itself might not want to sponsor that as the university, but a student organization within the school could certainly, in fact, it's possible, maybe someday we could have New Covenant group chapters as student organizations in various universities, bringing atheists and theists together to discuss such issues.
That's a good idea.
Student organization could get you in.
Yeah,
That makes sense, because we have tried to approach the University of West Florida and also Pensacola State College, and you know, the administrators want nothing to do with it. And I said, wow, we can bring people in that you would never get into this school, and these guys are very well trained. P.Z. Myers is not, you know, he's not a secondary professor. He's up there. I mean, he's brilliant. And so we wanted to do this at the same time that we could have people like Greg Bray. I don't know if you've ever taken the time to listen to his show that he did with us. He spent about an hour and a half actually educating all of us on evolution. Did a tremendous job, awesome job. Can't say enough about it.
Sure did.
And so we are wanting people to be educated. And one of the things that I'd like to say before the show ends, you are an extremely kind person, and I think that theists are going to find you very interesting, and their ears are going to be very open to what you have to say. You have a wonderful personality. Can't brag about you enough. Alan had something to say. I cut him off, and I apologize for being so rude, Alan.
I won't hold it against you. Hopefully we can go over a little bit. When you went to the University of West Florida and PSC, did you visit any of the places that the students gather?
No.
Next time you go to the University of West Florida Commons.
Yeah.
I went there for 3 conventions that happened the last 3 years, and it's going to be happening again this October. While I was there, I saw 2 or 3 dozen posters, all for different groups inside student operated groups inside of University of West Florida. Some of them were, I think one of them was a Secular Alliance, one of them was the LGBT Alliance, even Young Republicans Alliance. But it was just, they were everywhere, and there were a lot of posters that just said that there were many people with different mindsets.
Yeah, you'd have better luck getting through the Secular Student Alliance to bring in a speaker who's an atheist to have this kind of discussion. Because I do think, especially here in the South, universities are concerned about bringing in certain types of speakers to have at the schools.
Certainly. We have run out of time, unfortunately. It's been wonderful to have you on the show, Flash. I'm going to give Greg a quick final word. Make it quick, Greg. We've loved having you on the show.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to Flash for coming on the show, and to the Secular Party of America for making the leap to what you are from the National Atheist Party, specifically because I was one of the people who saw National Atheist Party and said, that's odd. I mean, it's a label that is hard to get people to identify with, and particularly with atheists, the best way to describe getting us to do anything is like herding cats. So giving us a single banner to rally behind, in that we are promoting secularism in government, is a fantastic way that not only atheists, but those who would identify as agnostics and many theists and Christians and Muslims and people from all across the board can join or support or in some way be a part of that which the Secular Party of America is doing. And I love the new name. I love the mission. The only thing that I'm curious about is what kind of actual platforms that are outside of anything secular, if you actually got a candidate to go, could you get such a wide and diverse group to possibly agree on outside of that? I mean, the atheist community especially is one of the most diverse and opinionated groups I've ever seen. So good luck to you if you get to the point where you can start bringing your own candidates to the table, because that's the point where we're all going to hate each other again.
I'm looking forward to that.
Bob, what are your final thoughts?
I think that the party will probably be most successful in the beginning as an endorsing organization, moving a platform forward within the other political parties. There's no reason why Democrats or Republicans can't be secularists. There's just no reason why they can't be. We just have a culture that's kind of stiffing it. So I applaud this, because even though I'm a theist, I don't want theistic ideas to prevail unless they genuinely prevail among people who embrace them for reasons they find authentic.
Yes.
So I applaud the democratic process, and I believe that the democratic process, in terms of a culture and a group of people, is more important than I can practice what I believe and those values and derive them the way that I do on my own. I don't need to be forcing this on anybody else, and I don't need an advantage to make sure that my values are the ones that prevail. So I think this is great what the secular organization is trying to do. And even though I'm a theist, I'm absolutely for secular government, absolutely for it.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
That doesn't mean I'm for an irreligious government either. It's where, what relevance does this even have to the issues we need to discuss as a nation?
So true. So true. Flash, your final comments.
I just wanted to thank you all so much for having me on the show. Like I said, by all means, check out our website at www.secularamerica.org. Find us on Facebook, and we're always looking for new members. We're looking for people to help out in leadership positions in the party, and we are looking for a president. So if you think you got what it takes to run a national organization, we'd be happy to hear from you.
I will say that I'm not going to volunteer for the president position, but if you just need an incredibly attractive spokesperson, I can be your guy.
Well, wonderful. We'll be in touch. And I was going to also say that if you need any assistance with trying to organize these talks at these universities and things, especially down in Florida, we know a few people down there, so we'd be more than happy to help you out.
That would be wonderful. I tell you what, you have been a wonderful guest tonight, and we will keep in contact with you. I get called a secular humanist all the time, and so I feel like I fit in naturally. And so
Yes, you do.
it is what it is. Honey, this has been good tonight.
It really has, and I just want to just ditto what Bob said, and that's how I feel about it. And thanks, Flash, and our panelists, and it's been a good night. And I do hope people go to the website for this new party and this new naming convention that they have, and I hope it takes off like wildfire.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like for Greg to close us out in prayer. Thank you, Greg.
You know, I knew you were going to put me on a spot like this, and I still didn't prepare anything. So let me fly off the cuff here. I'd like to, as is my tradition, say a prayer of thanksgiving here today. And actually, I had a little practice with this because I did attend Catholic Mass this morning, and well, actually, you really don't hear any prayers of thanksgiving there. But anyway, I wanted to say a special thank you to all of our viewers and everybody who supports the things that we do and the causes that we are supporting, and those who disagree with us but can honestly and earnestly engage us in conversation and discussion, because frankly, I don't want to live in an echo chamber. So today, my prayer of thanks is to civil discussions and those who come around them. Thank you for advancing society to where it has made it today. That was not very eloquent at the end there, sorry.
Well, amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen and amen. Okay,
You
thank you.
never asked me to close in prayer.
Thank
Next
you
week.
guys for your time. Good night.
Flash, that was awesome. I'm
Ladies and
glad you-
gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been an incredible night, and with a guest that has a name like Flash and the jawline of a comic book hero, how can we go wrong? Greg, I want to tell you how disappointed the whole nation is that you're not running for president of the secularists. They're all devastated.
Barely handle that.
Yeah, they can't hear you, Greg. They can't hear you scream. We want to encourage you to join us this Wednesday when we'll have the unconventional pastor Bob Graves on and Dr. Jones to follow, and then we'll be doing this all over again next Sunday from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock in the evening. And once again, I will be exhausted. We hope you had fun. See you next week.